I think I'm out. My dad just texted me. Everybody waited, Roger. Okay, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. At this time, I would like to call to order the regularly scheduled meeting of the Meridian Planning and Zoning Commission on June 20th, 2019. Let's begin with roll call.
Commissioner Holland?
Here.
Commissioner Chair Perot?
Here.
Commissioner McCarville?
Here.
Commissioner Olson?
Here.
Commissioners Fitzgerald, Castanelli, and Seal are absent.
Thank you. Next is the adoption of the agenda. Could I get a motion to adopt the agenda for June 20th, 2019?
So moved.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded to adopt the agenda. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Unopposed, motion carries. Next on our agenda this evening is the consent agenda, and we just have one item, the approval of minutes for the May 16, 2019 Planning and Zoning Commission. Can I get a motion to accept the consent agenda as presented?
So moved.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded to adopt the consent agenda. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Unopposed, motion carries. Okay, at this time, I would like to briefly explain the public hearing process for this evening. We will open each item individually and then start with the staff report. The staff will report their findings regarding how the item adheres to our comprehensive plan and uniform development code with the staff's recommendations. After the staff has made their presentation, the applicant will come forward to present their case for the approval of their application and respond to any staff comments. The applicant will have 15 minutes to do so. After they have finished, we will open for public testimony. There are iPads in the back if you'd like to sign up to speak. Each person testifying will come forward and be allowed 3 minutes. After all testimony has been heard, the applicant will be given another 10 minutes to have the opportunity to respond if they desire. Then we will close the public hearing and the commissioners will have a chance to discuss and hopefully be able to make a recommendation to City Council. So at this time, we will open our active items this evening. We will start with a public hearing for Rackham Subdivision, H2018-0126. Let's begin with the staff report.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the Commission. The first application before you tonight is a request for a preliminary plat. This site consists of 51.59 acres of land. It's zoned CG and is located at 1020 South Eagle Road. This property was annexed in 1995, and a development agreement was recently approved. The comprehensive plan future land use map designation is mixed use regional. A preliminary plat is proposed consisting of 20 building lots on 51.59 acres of land in the CG zoning district. The subdivision is proposed to develop in at least 3 phases as shown on the phasing plan. Primary access exists to the site via South Silverstone Way, a collector street at the southern boundary of the site. And that is right here where you can see my pointer. And a secondary access is available via South Rackham Way, a local street at the southwest corner of the site. And that is right here. All lots within the proposed subdivision are subject to a cross-access and parking easement. The Idaho Transportation Department submitted a letter to the city recommending the developer construct a second right turn lane at the eastbound off-ramp prior to commencement of Phase 3, or exceeding 668 PM peak hour trips as mitigation in lieu of mitigating for impacts to the northbound left turning movements at the westbound ramp. And this is an off-site improvement and isn't required as part of this application. Staff is just merely telling you the input that ITD had on this application. So although this mitigation would provide some relief to the overall operations of this interchange, which ITD feels is reasonable to offset the developer's impacts, because this is an off-site improvement, staff does not recommend it's required with the plat. However, it may be considered with the upcoming development agreement modification that will soon be submitted for this project. A 50-foot wide landscape street buffer containing a pathway is required along I-84, and a 20-foot wide buffer is required along Silverstone Way, a collector street. Rackham Way stubs to the site at the southwest corner, as I mentioned, and a shared cross-access driveway is proposed along and adjacent to the southern boundary between this property and the property to the south. There has been no written testimony received on this application, and staff is recommending approval. Staff will stand for any questions.
Commissioners have any questions for staff? Thank you. Thank you, Sonia. Would the applicant please come forward? Please state your name and address for the record.
Madam Chairman, Commissioners, my name is Jeffrey Wardle. My address is 251 East Front Street, Boise, Suite 200. I'm counsel for the applicant, BVA BC Eagleview, which is the owner of this property.
Second.
Okay. We're in agreement with the staff report. Want to highlight and identify just a couple issues that we want to go through and recognize that this application hasn't been before you, so we're going to give you a little bit of the background that we gave to the City Council when we got the development agreement approved a couple months ago. Eagleview Landing is the 51 acres that formerly was the farmstead, was previously owned by the Idaho Elks. This is a site that BVA, as affiliates, have worked on for several years as we've worked through this, and with the extension of Silverstone as part of the Rackham and the improvements on Rackham as part of Norco's project, this is now developable. However, this property has a long history because it was annexed into the city for a large retail center in 1995. Originally in the 1995 approval, it was zoned CG, the city's most intensive commercial use, for a large retail center that would have been approximately 70 acres. It contemplated 700,000 square feet of retail around a rather significant parking field. Now, since then, the property has been divided. There are currently two owners. You've had other applications in front of you relating to the Norco and Kistler properties to the south, as well as this one. We, throughout the time that we have been working on this, and like I said, I personally have worked with Tommy Alquist on this almost 6 years, was the first time that we had it under contract and did the evaluation for what it could be utilized. We've recognized that retail of this intensity is unnecessary and not conducive to what the Meridian Comprehensive Plan is seeking to do. That this really should be an employment center, bringing quality jobs closer to the residents that we have, and we should be promoting uses that are complementary with respect to their times and traffic flow. So what have we proposed? We've proposed a mixture of office, retail, commercial, medical, hospitality, entertainment, with 7 of the acres in the southeast corner designated for future development. That will be some mixture of office, commercial, or multifamily, but that will be subject to a future application. And as we talk about phasing, that will make more sense in a moment. This is the preliminary plat with the buildings on it as previously contemplated in the development agreement. It has always contemplated 3 significant office buildings located in this location, a mixture of hospitality and retail uses down here, the other possibility of either hospitality or office here with medical office out at this location, and then a future entertainment facility up here. When we talk about those properties in the southeast corner as part of phase 3, it's this 7 acres right here. The phasing plan was previously approved as part of the development agreement. And as we've been working on infrastructure planning with staff and with Public Works, as well as dealing with market conditions, we're going to be making an amendment to that development agreement that we have been coordinating with staff on so that this preliminary plat and that development agreement modification end up at the City Council at the same time. It's not a modification of structures, it's not a modification of any placement of buildings, it's just how do we get through the phases and what elements come first. So this was the approved plan. The first building that we are working on and that documents are in applications for the CZC design review and building permit are in for the ICCU building, which is right here. We contemplate a second office building here, which was originally intended to come forward this summer, but due to demand and due to configuration of how these are going to be, we're actually going to start with this area down here in these buildings so that the whole western portion of the site will come in together. But we're not modifying the location of the retail, we're not modifying the location of a structure here or these improvements here, it's just an issue of timing. So, as we've worked with staff on the phasing plan for infrastructure, the first phase involves and includes the construction of the main drive-in, as well as all of your primary site infrastructure and utilities, which will be here in the central part of it. And that's why we have proposed this phasing plan where phase 2 will happen depending upon market conditions, just because that infrastructure is already in. So we will have the infrastructure that's able to do that as we do phase 1. And this is the exhibit that Sonia had shown with that phasing overlaid onto the preliminary plat, with the caveat that all of this infrastructure that's necessary to be extended upon the private drive that extends north from Silverstone Way is located in this location. So, we're generally in agreement with the conditions of approval. We want to just talk about 4 things, and in our conversation with staff, we want you to be aware of and we want to put it on the record, but it's stuff that we believe that we'll be able to clean up in the next few weeks with staff before we get to the City Council. Those deal, first of all, with the buffer of the Silverstone right-of-way, second, the Jewel subdivision connection, third, the water connection, and then finally, the ITD requirement that Sonia, or ITD request that ITD had forwarded that Sonia shared. Silverstone Way is a public street that dead ends at this property. In our discussions with ACHD, it's been determined that as long as we build a mini roundabout at this location, that the site can be served with private access drives, and that's the intention. So we will provide the buffer that staff talks about, but we just want to be clear that when we talk about that, the roundabout here is the terminus of Silverstone Way, and so all of these areas immediately adjacent to this, will comply with both ACHD and the City of Meridian's requirements, but it is not a public street to the north. And I think staff and our engineering team, everybody's in agreement and ready and able to work through that. It's just we wanted to be clear as to what our interpretation was, and from my conversation with Sonia, I think we're all on the same page. Next, there is a requested condition that we provide a cross-access easement to the south to Jewel subdivision. Now, Jewel subdivision is a large lot, rural subdivision that was platted in Ada County in the 60s or 70s. And if we've all been doing this long enough, we see these designations pop up on plats for future road easement. Ada County required them. Ada County Highway District does not recognize them, and many of the property owners don't recognize them. And this is something that we find with some degree of regularity in the rural areas of Ada County for plats that were recorded in the 60s or 70s. We had originally approached these property owners about the utilization of this designated 50-foot wide future road easement as a secondary emergency access and had a negative response from those owners, so we went and solved that problem elsewhere. We are fine with a cross-access requirement, but it needs to be predicated on the fact that we'll reserve it and preserve it, but obviously we're not going to grant it and open it until some point in the future when those properties redevelop and those owners make that available. It wouldn't be a public street because obviously there's not a public street that it would connect to, but we recognize the importance of connectivity and support that. So unless and until the Jewel owners, grant the reciprocal right and open it, we agree with the condition, but we just want to be clear that we're not telling the Jewel property owners that they're having to open their property as part of this condition. It's a condition that your staff has recommended. There's a discussion in the staff report about the water connection, and obviously this is a big site and requires extension of water facilities through it. And we understand the issue that has been raised by Public Works is we had shown a stub of the water here to the eastern boundary. It's important to note that here on the northeast corner where the future recreational area will go, their water access and their need for where they would take their water would be on that northwest side. So we contemplate that, yes, there would be a looping of the water through the site. The sole reason, though, that we show that stub is that at some point when Rolling Hills redevelops and water needs to be extended through Rolling Hills, we need to do that. So I think it's just an issue for Public Works and our engineering team to work through, that the reason we stubbed that to the east wasn't to then stub it to the north, it's just to provide that future connection to the east to Rolling Hills when that redevelops. And we don't perceive that to be a problem because, as I indicated, the water service for this parcel here is going to be up here on the northwest portion of that, and that's where the water is. So ultimately, you're going to be able to loop it up like that with an extension here to the east for a future connection. Now, the last thing I just want to comment on is we have had a lot of discussions with staff about ACHD's requirements. We're in agreement with them. ITD's issues, we had a lot of meetings and discussions with those as well, and we recognize there are significant traffic impacts at Eagle and Overland and at the interstate. Originally, ITD had requested that we improve the northbound turning movements coming off the westbound ramp by constructing a third lane. And our objection to that was none of the turning movements created by this project relate to a northbound turning movement on that westbound lane. It's off-site, it's not related to the traffic, it's not related to traffic that we generate. They came back and requested that at the third phase, or 668 p.m. peak hour, that we consider a second right turn lane here on the eastbound off-ramp, and that may satisfy some of those constitutional requirements. But anytime we talk about an off-site improvement, there's always a concern with, is the impact proportionate to what the property and the project is causing, and is there actually a nexus between it? We do not deny that there are significant traffic issues out there. The issue that we see, though, is a lack of consistency in ITD's requests of municipalities, that ITD needs to get out front of these issues. We're willing to participate with our proportionate share. We always are. We're even willing to take the lead in doing it. But you can't just stick a large application with an impact that relates to improving an overall system that has been neglected by the transportation planners. So ITD needs to engage. Future developments in this area need to participate, and we're more than willing to cost share, but we'll work through that with staff. So conclusions, we generally support the staff report. We'll work with staff on those items, and we appreciate staff's characterization of ITD's request because we do agree that that's something that can and should be addressed in the future. And with that, I'll stand for any questions you might have.
The commissioners have any questions for the applicant?
Thank you.
Is there anyone here to testify this evening for this application?
And hold on just one moment, let me look. We do not have anybody further to testify.
Okay. Is there anyone here in the room that would like to come forward and testify on this application? Okay.
Madam Chair.
Commissioner McCarville?
Madam Chair, before we close public, I'd like to ask staff a question. Are you in agreement with all of the points the applicant brought up at the end with these four additional things?
Madam Chair, there,
The applicant referred to that they had been in contact with you and you were in agreement. I just want to make sure that's the case.
well, we're in agreement, I believe, on the, after I clarified the street buffer requirement along Silverstone. We're in agreement on that.
Okay.
Mr. Wardle brought up several things that are more development agreement related that aren't necessarily the subject of this application.
Okay.
We are in agreement that we're not requiring any off-site improvements, as mentioned in the ITD report. There is not a requirement in the staff report to provide a cross-access easement aligning with the access easement from the subdivision to the south.
For Jewel?
South boundary, yeah, there's not a provision in the staff report for that. So that is something that I mentioned in the staff report that we may be considering with the development agreement modification, though, but not with this application, so.
And then the Eagle View Landing water.
I am not sure on that.
Water
That is
loop.
a Public Works condition. So any modification of that would have to be run through them. So I'd suggest the applicant make contact with them before the council hearing.
Madam Chairman and Commissioner, just to clarify the water loop issue there, we have had those discussions. We are designing, the recommendation, Public Works, was if you're going to stub it to the east end, then go ahead and run it all the way down Rolling Hill. And we're just like, that's not necessary and it's not the time for that. We're stubbing it so we can do that, but we will loop it back to the northern property boundary. It just isn't showing right now, so we'll get that solved. And I don't disagree with Sonia that these are development agreement issues. It's just the fact that since this is piggybacked with a development agreement application that will come in next week, we've been trying to sort out as many of these issues as possible with staff at the same time.
Okay.
Thank you.
And I did have one more question for you. Do you have, the only access in there is not really coming along where the current Norco building is? It's,
So there are two public streets that dead end at
Okay.
this. There is Rackham here on the west, which is a constrained right in, right out off of Overland. And then you have Silverstone Way, which comes up here past the Norco building, which is a 5-lane collector with a signal at Overland. So those are the two points of public contact. And then in our negotiations with Norco, there is going to be a shared private drive that connects those two with an easement benefiting both of those properties for circulation.
Madam Chair.
Any additional questions? Commissioner Holland?
So just looking at, transportation planning on how people would be coming in and out of this site for the proposed entertainment recreation facility on Phase 2B, would they be going through the roundabout and straight through that, or would they be cycling in the roundabout and to the east and up? What's your thoughts there on how traffic would flow?
So, Madam Chairman, Commissioner Holland, the way that this is being engineered and designed and the way it will be constructed is that we have this southern access, shared access drive across here with essentially a secondary vehicular access here and a secondary one over here, and then it loops around. So as we've designed this and worked with our transportation team, and this is what has taken so long with this application, is sorting through with ACHD exactly how this mini roundabout works and then how the internal circulation works. And so our traffic study has been designed, and this has been designed so that you're going to be able to go through, you're going to be able to go right, you're going to be able to go left, and there are going to be various points of access to get back there. Now, obviously, internal circulation becomes an issue of signage, but if we provide enough alternative access points through the site, we think that helps to dissipate traffic and it helps to keep the traffic moving at an appropriate speed, because the intention is that this is single lane through here with retail fronting on it with angled parking, so that it is intended to slow those vehicles down.
Thank you.
Are those all the questions?
Thank
you
you.
very much. At This time, can I get a motion to close the public hearing for Rackham subdivision H20180126?
Second.
It has been moved and seconded to close the public hearing for Rackham subdivision. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
None opposed, motion carries. Who wants to start our conversation this evening?
Madam Chair.
Commissioner McCarville?
I think it shows a lot of promise, and I like the mix of uses there instead of just all being retail. The flow of traffic, I don't see being concentrated at any one time, which I think will help things through there, rather than having, all of one use. And having something finally go on that corner seems like it's been a long time in the making. But I do like the mix of uses on this instead of all the retail.
Any other thoughts?
Madam Chair,
Commissioner Holland?
if Commissioner Casanelli was here, I think he might be happy to see all the parking. The one thing that's always a challenge for me is it's good to have enough parking, but I also don't want to see Meridian just become a sea of asphalt either. And so it does look like a lot of parking for this application. And I don't know that that's something we necessarily need to change, but certainly would have, for something that needs this much parking, I would have liked to have seen maybe a parking structure of some sort. Again, I don't know that we really have control over that, but just a thought I wanted to voice out there. Overall, I like the mix of uses there. I think it's smart to have a blend of office, medical, entertainment, retail, and some potential multifamily or other commercial in the future. No big concerns on the general mix. Always like to see more green space when it's possible, but I think with the plan, it looks like they've got a pathway that kind of goes around the site. There's obviously an entertainment option that's coming in the top right corner there that would be kind of a recreational amenity that might help offset that a little bit. But those are some of my thoughts.
Thank you. Commissioner Olson, anything to add?
No, I see no reason why we can't approve this.
Okay. I agree with Commissioner Holland. It felt very, very asphalt intensive. I guess if you're going to have a project with this much parking, that's the location to do it, right there along a main area. I don't love that much parking, but there wouldn't be a different location where that would suit that I can think of. So other than that, I agree with my fellow commissioners on the variety of buildings that will be there, the variety of services that are offered to the public, and it'll be nice to see something go in there. So if there are no other comments or questions, can I get a motion?
Madam Chair.
Commissioner McCarville?
After considering all staff, applicant, and public testimony, I move to recommend approval to City Council for file number H-2018-0126 as presented in the staff report for the hearing date of June 20th, 2019, as presented.
Madam Chair.
Commissioner Holland?
Just one question. Do we, and maybe this is a question for staff, do we need to mention anything about the 4 items we talked about? I know a lot of those are in the development agreement conversations, but since there was mention of those things in the staff report, especially the Public Works one, I don't know if we needed to mention that they would work with Public Works staff to find something that would work for them.
Commissioner Holland, I don't know that any changes are necessary to the staff report unless you're changing the condition.
Okay. Then I'll second.
It has been moved and seconded to approve the application for Rackham subdivision H20180126. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
None opposed. Motion carries. Congratulations. Next, we will open the public hearing for Silver Springs application H20190058. Let's start with the staff report.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the commission. The next applications before you are a request for annexation and zoning and a preliminary plat. This site consists of 19.74 acres of land. It's zoned R4 and RUT in Ada County. The R4 is already in the city, and it's located at 1305, 1157, 805, and 905 East McMillan Road. Adjacent land use and zoning to the north is McMillan Road and single-family residential properties in Saguaro Canyon and Larkwood subdivisions, zoned R4 and RUT in Ada County. To the west are single-family residential homes zoned R4 in Cobre Basin subdivision. To the east is a home and landscape business zoned RUT in Ada County. And to the south are single-family residential homes in Havasu Creek subdivision and an elementary school zoned R4. Little history, this property was previously platted as lots 1 through 4, Crestwood subdivision. Lots 1 through 3 were annexed into the city in 2006 with R4 zoning. The comprehensive plan future land use map designation is low-density residential, which is 3 or fewer units per acre. Staff has revised the staff report about an hour ago based on some determination by legal counsel. So I just want to make sure that you do have the correct staff report in front of you. The one that I emailed, I think it was right at 5 o'clock or right thereabouts today. So apologies for that lateness. And I'll go over the summary of the staff report. First, the annexation and zoning is requested of the eastern 5.19 acres of the site with R4 zoning district. There is an existing home on the property and a landscape nursery is currently operating on this site and was recently approved through Ada County to operate for an additional 5-year period of time. The applicant is requesting this business is allowed to continue operation in the city temporarily with sunset date of December 31st, 2022 at the latest, in order to sell off his existing inventory. This use is classified as a nursery and urban farm and a contractor's yard in the UDC, which is a prohibited use in the R4 district. However, because the landscape business is currently legally operating in the county, it would be considered a non-conforming use in the city. As such, the use may continue if deemed appropriate by City Council, as long as it remains lawful and is not expanded or extended per the standards for non-conforming uses. And that is the section that was revised in the staff report. Staff had previously interpreted that it would be a prohibited use if it was brought into the city, and legal determined that it would actually be a non-conforming use, which is allowed to continue if council determines annexation of the property is appropriate. So just to clarify that. And then they are proposing a preliminary plat consisting of 57 single-family residential building lots and 6 common lots for the development of detached homes at a gross density of 2.89 units per acre, consistent with the low-density residential future land use map designation. The subdivision is proposed to develop in 2 phases, as shown, with the last phase developing once the landscape business use ends. There are 4 existing homes and accessory structures on this site that are proposed to remain on lots in the proposed subdivision. All other accessory structures are proposed to be removed. 1 public street access is proposed via East McMillan Road, an existing stub street, North Mooney Falls Way, at the south boundary of the site is proposed to be extended with development, and a stub street is proposed to the east for future extension. All of the existing homes will take access from local streets within the development, except for 1, the property at 1035 McMillan Road, which is Lot 12, Block 3, is proposing to retain their 2 driveway accesses via McMillan. And that is a picture of the home here, and then the red arrows here point out the existing driveway locations. Council approval of a waiver to UDC 11383 is requested for these accesses to remain. ACHD is requiring the west access to be closed. So that would be this one right here. A 25-foot wide landscape street buffer is required along McMillan Road, containing a 5-foot wide detached sidewalk. And this is a copy of the landscape plan that the applicant submitted, and it does show several of the existing trees on the site. The ones with X's through them are the ones that are proposed to be removed. This is the children's play equipment that's proposed. A minimum 10% qualified open space is required to be provided with this development. The qualified open space exhibit shown depicts area that does not qualify, and that is this small area right here at the west end of the property. Staff is recommending a revised exhibit. Plat and landscape plan is submitted prior to the council meeting that complies with the minimum standards. A minimum of one site amenity is also required. A children's play structure and micropath to the school site to the south are proposed as amenities in accord with UDC standards. Conceptual building elevations were submitted for the proposed single-family residential homes as shown. Written testimony has been received from Dave Jorgensen, the applicant's representative, in response to the staff report, and he will go through his requested changes. Staff is not in support of the existing landscape business use continuing operation in the city as a non-conforming use for the following reasons. First, the use is commercial and industrial in nature and is not an allowed use in the R4 zoning district. Second, the use is not compatible with the proposed residential uses. Third, any code enforcement issues would be the responsibility of the city. Fourth, it's difficult to track sunset clauses in development agreements, and if the use is not concluded by the sunset date, it becomes the city's responsibility for enforcement. Therefore, for these reasons, staff recommends denial of the proposed annexation of this parcel, as it's staff's opinion that it is not in the best interest of the city to annex the property at this time. Staff is recommending approval of the preliminary plat request per the conditions in the staff report. Staff recommends if the commission and council determines it is in the best interest to annex the property at this time as proposed by the applicant, staff is recommending the project is continued to a subsequent hearing date in order for staff to prepare recommended development agreement provisions related to the existing use and for the applicant to submit a copy of the site plan approved by Ada County. As is, if the landscape business comes into the city, they are no longer tied to the terms of the conditional use permit that was approved in the county. So without a development agreement and provisions related to the use, which would probably include the specific use standards for such uses in the city, they wouldn't have any regulations associated with it. If commission and council agrees with staff's recommendation, staff is recommending the project is continued to a subsequent hearing date in order for the applicant to submit a revised preliminary plat that excludes the subject annexation area. And if that happens, their access from the south here would not be feasible as a public street at this time. However, there does appear to be adequate room for a 20-foot wide emergency access for secondary access for the site. So those are the issues we're looking at. Staff will stand for any questions.
Do the commissioners have any questions for staff?
Madam Chair.
Commissioner McCarville?
Sonia, does maybe a sunset date of December 31st of this year help at all?
That would be a question for the applicant.
Okay. I mean, as far as the staff is concerned for the complications on the city side of it, enforcement and all that kind of good stuff.
If we bring them in and we annex them, then it becomes the city's responsibility.
Okay.
If we say that, and this was the way it was written in the original staff report, and that's probably what you're referring to, but originally I had said if staff would support annexation if the business terminates within 6 months. And the 6-month clause was before the property was annexed, meaning
Right.
it would conclude before the development agreement was signed. So then it would not be an issue for the city for
Right.
enforcement.
Clear. Sure.
If that helps.
Okay, are you finished with the staff report?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, at this time, would the applicant like to come forward?
Dave, I'll get your presentation up here.
Thank you. Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Dave Jorgensen. For the record, my address is 14254 West Battenberg Drive in Boise. And I'm here on behalf of myself, as well as Todd Campbell Construction, We are the two developers of this development. We're master planning together. And appreciate staff's thorough analysis. This is a complex site, and though it's not uncommon to have infill sites to be difficult, so I'll just keep moving into the project here. As you see the layout, we've worked through various issues, but let me give you a quick summary of this. First of all, the Silver Springs development is two developers working together to master plan the community, which we think is better to master plan than piecemeal this development. It'll be a total of 57 homes, 4 existing and 53 new homes, all of which are within the compatible size and homes of the surrounding area. It's 4 parcels totaling a total of about 20 acres, 3 of which were mentioned were previously annexed into the city as R4, and 1 parcel is an existing parcel in the county. We're requesting the same zoning. We're not requesting a rezone of the other 3 parcels. There'll be custom homes or semi-custom homes, again, consistent with the surrounding area. We're also providing the pedestrian access, additional one for the school site, as well as a children's tile-out play area. This is infill development, which always seems to have challenges. Let's see if I can move here. Here we go. Well, what are those challenges? First of all, we have access issues. We have a challenge with designing around existing homes and competing with substantial number of trees, existing trees, try to preserve as many as we can, as well as the existing landscape business operations that were referenced earlier. A quick summary is the ACHD staff report did come in late, though it should be in your most recent packet, I understand. We agree with all the conditions of approval in ACHD. We don't have any objections to them. And it's a staff level approval, and so it's complete. With regard to the city staff report, this latest version, I'll try to refer to that one, as I think that's what we're talking about today. I've made some adjustments to my presentation in the numbering sequences and just have a few proposed hopeful changes to the staff report. Let me hit the big one that was discussed earlier, and that is the existing landscape business. Out there are actually 3 existing landscape businesses that operate in that area. Ours, that's being included in this development, is one of the 3. It is by far the least intensive of the 3 landscape business operations. He recently went through the process. He's a pretty good rule follower. I've actually been very impressed with his efforts. The other 2 I don't want to disparage, but I haven't seen the same efforts, where this gentleman currently renewed his conditional use permit with the county, and it was recently approved just a couple weeks ago with no opposition. And virtually the same conditions as before. However, he's not a full-fledged contractor where he's bringing lots of trees and a heavy contract use where some contractors adjacent are doing. He's not bringing any more inventory in. He's actually more of a tree farmer. And the bulk of the 1,000 trees on the property are existing trees in the ground. And you can't just ball them up and haul them off and go plant them, but he tries to estimate how many trees based on the work that he has in front of him. And you have to then dig them up when they're dormant, and that's how the business works for him. He doesn't have a lot of staff. It's not a retail operation. It's a very small operation, which is very different than the 2 other adjoining parcels. As a side note, he's been recently approached by one of those operators that if this property is not annexed into the city, would you please sell to me, so he could expand his business even further. So I would agree with staff that this type of use is not appropriate in a residential area. However, I also would believe that it is in the city's best interest to get under the control of the city so that these types of operations don't expand even further and have a greater impact on the residential areas. So with that in mind, I do believe that adequate timing is needed. And so our request, when we get to that point with the development agreement with annexation to the site, is that the city does annex the property with a condition for the sunset clause, as well as to make sure that he doesn't expand the business further and maybe more or less comply with the similar conditions that are already in place that were put upon him by the county. The landowners, I approached them today, said, well, yes, I can probably live with the date that staff had mentioned. Is the June, I think it's June, Sonia, I'm looking at you for a second. I think it's June 2022 is what was originally discussed. There's a fear of the market. You just never know where it's going, recognizing his preference would be to be allowed to have the currently allowed 5 years. And so the June 2024 is the seller's request. This is an old condition, but I'll just highlight it, recognizing it may come up as we get to the development agreement. There's consideration of expanding and adding sidewalk across the entire frontage of the development. There's no problem with the first 3 parcels as they'll be developed in phase 1. However, with this eastern parcel, there is a problem and several facts to it. First of all, this homeowner, he lives there. He doesn't just travel back and forth. He actually lives there with those nursery trees in the back. And he has substantial landscaping with a waterfall for privacy and sound buffer that would have to be removed in order to put the sidewalk in the location ACHD would require it to be. So the hope is, well, let's say it this way, the other concern would be is if we install it where the approximate location is for the berming, well, there's still technically 3 access points that he currently utilizes, 2 for the construction business and 1 for the home. Well, the sidewalk would be high in one point and low down another point as it accommodates existing driveway accesses. Those areas would have to be torn out, so it'd just be a waste of money to put those sidewalk pieces in. Lastly, again, with those 2 landscape businesses further to the east, this would, and I hate to say it, but it really would be a sidewalk to nowhere. There's no intentions or plans for those other 2 businesses to turn into a type of use that would allow or require the sidewalk to be in place. So we're not saying we won't put the sidewalk in, we're just asking we put it in at the same time as the rest of the Phase 2 development improvements go in. That would be our request. Now, this is an important concern of ours. It's listed in the current staff report as A1B, where there's a requirement for the cul-de-sac length on the western side. We're working with an existing access problem to the site. There's an easement that was recorded in the first phase of the Copper Basin development on Red Horse Way on our western boundary. It's a 50-foot wide ingress-egress access. However, it's an easement, not public right-of-way. So the city and ACHD asked that we approach the Copper Basin HOA to see if they would cooperate and be willing to utilize this as public right-of-way. Short answer is never. Would that be allowed? And ACHD Legal researched it and determined they cannot require that upon this development as well. And so with that in mind, we're very restricted in our design options with this site. To show just illustration here, the yellow arrow is where that 50-foot wide access easement is, but it's not for public right-of-way or public use. And this red arrow points to the cul-de-sac of concern. It's approximately 50 or 60, about 60 feet longer than the 450 that's desired by the city standards. We've looked at a lot of variety of options and alternatives how to design this. And every time we come up with either something that's more inefficient, but still the same length of cul-de-sac. Our ask is that this condition be waived and deleted and allow a slightly longer cul-de-sac for this development. Just a couple of minor items. Staff had mentioned allowing the existing access for 1035 East McMillan to retain their current access. We wrote this response to the city prior to receiving ACHD staff report. I have talked to the owner at 1035, who will stay in this home, by the way. He was the first owner of the home. He's lived there since the 70s. And just a couple of key points. ACHD does support one single access as it aligns with the Larkwood Street, which is the key point there. And so we're requesting, and I don't know if this commission can make this determination or if it's by council, but we're asking that the city council grant this waiver that's been, we know it's been allowed in a few other locations in the city, but either delete the condition A1D as written or modify the condition to allow the existing access until the property redevelops. And there's the arrow pointing to that access. Yes, I shouldn't have touched that. There we go. Lastly, real quickly, there's condition A1E and A2E. There's a request for a additional common area pathway up to McMillan on the eastern portion of the development. We're requesting that not be in place. And the reasons why are follows. First of all, we met with city staff to identify the pedestrian and street connectivity within the development. There was an initial request to have pedestrian access to McMillan. As we worked through the access issues, we later determined that the only way to have the vehicle access is, of course, with this new access on McMillan. So now we're providing both pedestrian and vehicle access with the new entrance. We're not aware of any comp plan requirements for spacing. We think it's more of a nice to have, not a true requirement to have secondary pedestrian access. Frankly, it requires to do this to design a lot of existing trees. We'll probably have to lose another lot with the development to accommodate this. And there's plenty of interconnectivity within the neighborhood adjacent to the east when that gets developed as well. So our ask is that a second pedestrian access not be required. However, just allow the main entrance, which would include pedestrian access, suffice for that request. And therefore, we ask that condition A1E and A2E be deleted. In summary, these are 2 developers working together, trying to do a master plan for development. It'll be a quality development is compatible with the adjoining surrounding areas. It's infill development has several challenges as listed. We request approval with the changes as I note here with regard to the annexation of the 5-acre parcel and allow the business operations to continue, as well as delete the conditions as listed and then grant that waiver for the single access for the home on 1035 McMillan. Thank you for your time, and I'll stand for any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the applicant? Okay, I have one for you. Has there been any conversation about you purchasing, the developer purchasing that eastern parcel, holding on to it, leasing it back to the tree farmer, and then, doing a modification to the development agreement at the time that he's done selling everything and going from there?
Madam Chair, actually, yes. And he said no.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. In fact, he asked me if I'd put an offer together. I spent time doing it, and then he said no.
I'm sorry. to
Not
hear that.
because of the value, but because he changed his mind.
I see. Thank you. Any additional questions? Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Is there anyone here signed up to testify?
There was no one to sign up to testify. There were two that signed up just as a neutral, so I don't know if they want.
Okay. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to come forward and speak on this application? Please state your name and address for the record.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Reed, the 4989 North Larkwood Place. And I'm the HOA president for our subdivision for Larkwood. New to the board, so coming to this meeting is a little bit new for me to figure out exactly what I'm supposed to be doing and understanding. But the neighborhood does have quite the concern for the traffic, and if having only one access to the in and out of all those homes where we already have major traffic problems, getting in and out of our neighborhood with line of sight, and accidents that happen on our road, because we only have one access and we have to stop for pedestrians, and then we have to stop for the traffic. A left turn currently is not very easy, especially during the high traffic hours between 3:30 and 6 o'clock. So having to stop again for more traffic with the neighborhood coming only one access, they could be turning right. So then therefore we have to watch again for more traffic from Saguaro, which is where we used to be able to see, which is the light. We would now be right by our subdivision, having to not even have access to go to the left. And traffic is continuing to increase upon McMillan. So our major concern throughout the neighborhood is that the traffic is going to increase exponentially. It's already increasing just with the city, with general traffic and stuff that we have. So having a subdivision there with the 2-lane road in and out is already a big problem for our subdivision. So that's our major concern with that many houses and only having one access, and it's straight onto McMillan, is a big concern of ours. And I don't know if they mentioned with the applications the size of the lots that will be going there. And so we didn't know the size of the families and cars and how much traffic will be coming in and out there is kind of one of our big concerns. So
Where's the entrance to your subdivision? I'm sorry, is it to the east or the west of the light on Copper Basin? Isn't there a light there?
Yes, there's the light at the Copper Basin. We are to the west side, the Locust Grove side. I don't know my east and west very good.
Okay, that's to
We
the
are
east.
between the light at Locust Grove and the Copper Basin.
Okay.
We are right across from the home that is trying to only have the one driveway come in. Their initial driveway comes right out of our subdivision. So the home that is existing and staying has a rounded driveway where they go in one way and come out the other.
Mm-hmm.
And our subdivision is right across from,
To the east,
From that,
on the south
yeah.
side of the road?
yeah,
Okay.
to
Are
the
you
north side of the road.
them?
Yeah.
Okay. Are you across McMillan from them, or are
Mhm.
you, okay, okay.
Yeah.
All right,
Yeah.
any questions for,
Thank you.
okay, thank you. Is there anyone else here who would like to speak on this application? Please come forward. Hi there. Please state
Hi.
your name and address for the record.
Laird Graham, 1215 East Greenhaven Street, Meridian. So the comments that I have to do with irrigation water. And I guess I might ask, does the commission want to hear about this, or do I have the wrong forum?
It depends on
Okay.
what your concerns are.
Go ahead.
So the applicant's properties are served by the Parkins Norris irrigation lateral, which is part of the Settlers Irrigation District, as is our property. Our property flood irrigates, and we take, there's multiple issues here. Number one is, I haven't heard anything about where they're gonna get their irrigation water. Perhaps they're going to get it out of this lateral, and then I'd be curious to know what the system they're going to use to assure, deliver irrigation water to the homes. We have an issue with, this is the third subdivision, and the one coming next on your agenda will be the fourth in the Crestwood Estates. And we have an issue with Kingston where they take their water for their homes out of the ditch, and they need continuous delivery, but we flood irrigate and we take all the water out of the ditch for a period of time. Thus, they can't give continuous delivery because we take it all for a period of time when it's our turn, so to speak. And they didn't make a provision for that, and that created a conflict that we've kind of had to work through. We're in a period of plenty of water the last few years, and so it hasn't been, it was resolvable, but if it was short of water, we would probably have a bigger problem than we do. Also, the water that serves these 4 properties needs to stay in that lateral. We don't need the time, we don't need all that water, but we need the volume that it creates so that we can flood irrigate our properties. Also, the water's coming at these properties, and they need to make a provision to drain it. Because if it doesn't drain, it backs up and floods those of us who do flood irrigate. And so I'd be curious to know how they propose to handle that. I assume it's going to be by drain, it needs to be properly sized so it takes it all, otherwise it backs up. And we've had some issues with that in the past.
Is that everything? Looks like about the 3 minutes is up, or close to it.
That's my concerns.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you very much.
Thank you.
If there is no one else here to testify, and you have no other questions for staff, we can close the public hearing. Can I get a motion?
No, we need the applicant come.
Oh, I'm sorry. My apologies. Please come back forward. Forgive me.
Madam Chair, members of the commission, Dave Jorgensen for the record. Not a problem, happy to answer all the questions. I heard a couple of questions, one from Ms. Reed about the access and traffic and lot sizes. Lot sizes are consistent with the R4 zone and the surrounding areas. I think the minimum for that zone is 8,000 square feet, all of which exceed that. The homes, again, will be consistent or similar, not same as, but similar to the surrounding homes. Not theirs, because that's an old county subdivision of large lots, but all the other urban subdivision houses. With regard to access and traffic, she's right. I wish I could have access to Red Horse Way. That is by far the best solution to this development. It's not an option. And so we put it in the location that ACHD told us to put it. And so that's why this development complies with ACHD's conditions. And so unfortunately, they may or may not like that answer, but the reality is to develop this site, that's where this will be. And yet it's also spaced adequately to provide better safety than just somewhere else. Secondly, Mr. Graham had asked some questions about irrigation. We've had several conversations with the irrigation district, a couple with Settlers Irrigation, also with a gentleman who has been serving, though I don't know if he currently still is, with regard to the irrigation board with the Parkins North Lateral. He's also a resident of the Heritage Commons subdivision, so he kind of dual serves in those roles. We've had several conversations with him as well, and we've looked at a couple of different options. I agree with Mr. Graham as far as the rotation of water is not ideal. It is very problematic. In fact, I know Kingston has a greater problem than we do because their rotation is much shorter than ours. They're 1 5-acre parcel and we are 4. And so in essence, we have 4 times the amount of water that they do. So we've already been working through a solution on that, and we actually have 2 different alternatives, one of which will be tested later this summer. And if it satisfies all of the users, including Mr. Graham, then we'll actually look at some alternatives for point of diversion changes. If that's not satisfactory, then we'll just deal with the water that we have coming into the site. We have several private wells that are on site that are ample, including the landscaper who's used this for irrigation, that will use as backup water and supplemental water for this development. So based on our analysis, we have 2 options of how to irrigate this site. The other question was asked regarding wastewater. And we plan on piping them just like it traditionally does. The water historically came from the east and flowed to the west. These 4 parcels are the last 4 parcels in the line of water. And once it hits the end, it goes to the north to McMillan, to the large canal on the north side of McMillan. And we will just dispose the water where it did traditionally. So no changes there also. I think that answers the questions, Madam Chair, but I'll stand for any of the questions you might have.
Madam Chair,
Commissioner Holland?
just out of curiosity, what was the reason on why Red Horse Way wouldn't be an option?
Whew. Madam Chair, Commissioner Holland, the easement is not for public use. It was just an access easement for adjoining parcel. As you read the language, it's vague on the plat. It's unfortunate it wasn't dedicated for public use. It wasn't, more importantly, dedicated as public right-of-way. And so that's the first part of it. So we are required as landowner to approach the adjoining neighbor to see if they would be willing to grant it as public right-of-way. And honestly, that's probably one of the most, if not the worst, most difficult homeowner association meeting I've ever attended, the way I was talked to. And that's okay, that's part of my job. And so I did as I was asked to do, to try to sell it and try to show how this is better for everyone.
Like continue this, so it might be good to just keep it open while we deliberate, just a suggestion.
I agree.
Okay. That's good.
I guess we'll start with the annexation in general. I do think the sooner we can get it annexed, probably the better, and then that will at least allow these to develop as they need to, as they can, you know, as far as this plat. But agree that if we do annex it, we need to give staff time to word it properly and get the agreements in place. But I do think probably, given this area and how developed it is all around it, I would say the sooner cities probably the better. Even with the sunset clause, I'm not sure that it needs to be out to 2024, but I don't know if there's a whole lot of things in here to take a look at.
Year, because I understand that if you've got a business, especially when it's landscaping, you've got lots of trees to move. It's not just as easy to uproot them and move them. They would need some time to kind of close out operations and understand staff's concern that once it's R4, it's not a non-allowed use. So maybe if we were to make a recommendation for continuation, I would just ask that staff would work on what date they'd feel comfortable with if they were to let that be grandfathered in until a certain point in time. And then we can make that recommendation to council. Looking at the other conditions they asked for, they requested to delete the condition that the applicant install the sidewalk in front of McMillan, the 1157 East McMillan. Certainly understand their concerns there, but I know it's always challenging because if you don't put sidewalks in when development processes are going through, they don't come back in later. But I think their request was that they still would put in the sidewalk, they just didn't want to do it at the beginning part of the development.
Right.
So I don't know that I have a concern with phasing of it as long as it gets put in there at some point. So I guess I'm kind of neutral on that one overall. Allow the western cul-de-sac to be allowed. Again, I think that's a staff and ACHD item of concern because I don't know what's allowed in code. And I know they can only make so many exceptions on some of those things, but again, I'm kind of neutral on that one too. And then they also asked us about existing resident at 1035 McMillan granting a waiver. That's not up to our discretion, that's up to city council because we don't have the right to give that waiver. But we could certainly make our comments known. I don't have a concern with them keeping one access point, but I think having 2 access on the driveway probably is more than they need.
Yeah.
So that's where I'm at.
Madam Chair, didn't they say ACHD is already said they can only have one?
Right.
And it's the one to the east, I think.
Yep.
Yeah.
The only other thing they asked us about was to not require the common lot pathway. And, I don't know what our pathway master plan shows in that area, but if they want to have a pathway there to connect it with the rest of the system, I'd say we encourage that because there needs to be more pathway connections in Meridian. Those are my thoughts overall for now.
So it's my understanding that the owner of that eastern property asked for the 5 years, but the applicant had originally stated 3 years in their application. So I think that's what the applicant's requesting, even though the owner would prefer to have 5. And then, of course, the staff had mentioned something along the lines of 6 months, because it goes along with the schedule development, so that the city would not have to police the situation. So it sounds like the applicant would prefer 3 years if it's something that we recommend to city council, that they be permitted to proceed with annexation.
Madam Chair,
Commissioner McCarville.
I guess I have less heartburn over it being that it's not retail, that it is pretty much just trees being grown there and dug up when they're dormant. So kind of in the off season anyway, it's not as if they're, it's commercial going in and out of there amongst the residential. It's just watering trees pretty much. So I guess I am leaning a little bit toward, I think that in and of itself lends itself to go ahead and get it annexed and get the plans in place. But I'm open to having the applicant and staff work that date out, but I don't think it needs to be 2024. Within somewhere between 6 months and probably 2 years at the most.
That leads me to a question for the applicant. Mr. Yorkson, would you mind coming forward again? Is there a possibility of creating an agreement with that landowner that if the trees are not removed within the time period, decided that then it would be your opportunity to purchase the property from him within a given period of time? Do you think he would be agreeable to that?
Madam Chair, we have just to be fully disclosure here, our contract is to purchase the property as we develop it. So we're obviously purchasing the portion of phase 1 within days after the approval by city council. And we have the option to purchase phase 2 already. It's just a matter of as soon as the trees are gone. As I was leaning over talking to one of our partners over here, we're going to use as many of the trees as we can on our site. That's more efficient for us. It's cheaper for him and for us. There's a lot of efficiencies with that. But again, there's a little over 1,000 trees. We can't use all of them on our site, as much as that might look really nice. It's a lot of trees for 53 houses. And so we'll, obviously, he has other customers he sells them off to, and that's why I was comfortable with a 3-year time frame. 6 months to a year is not going to work just because of dormancy, and just all those trees won't disappear in 1 year, recognizing when the clock may start. But that's our goal. To answer your specific question, if you want to put that condition in, I don't know how you enforce it, but that is our plan.
Yeah.
Just if you want to put it in there, I'm not going to oppose it probably. I just don't know how you enforce that if I can't.
I just wasn't sure if you had a purchase agreement with him, or if there was a closing, if you had already come to an agreement on a proposed closing date of 3 years, or if he was insisting on the 5, or how that was was working for you.
Yeah, Madam Chair, there's no
landowner.
hard closing date, only because we really kind of don't know when this gets approved, and then he has an idea how often, how many trees he uses per year, and so that's kind of where that 3-year time frame came, but I recognize it could be 2 years, it probably won't be 5, unless the market shifts pretty quickly, but 1 year is not feasible. Hope that helps.
Just the point that you being in possession of the land makes a big difference, right?
Madam Chair, I've offered it once, I'll offer it again.
Yeah.
He'll probably stay in the home. But even as of early as yesterday, he's thinking, I don't know if I'll stay here any longer. Because his business operation will get chewed up so quickly with our first phase that he might move quicker. I can't hold him to it. We don't have a contract that says that either. But he's understanding that this is not the right location for this type of use, especially as the homes get closer to him.
Okay, thank you very much.
Hope that helps.
One more question,
Oh,
follow
you
up.
bet.
Sure.
Mr. Holland.
Would there be a chance, and this might be a question for staff, if they were to enter into some sort of formal contract with the landscaping company, would that help appease some of staff's concerns about transitioning out of that use?
Chair, Commissioners, that's really a decision of the Commission and Council.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. As stated before, I'll state on the record, we are the purchaser of the whole 5 acres, just in 2 phases, and it could happen in 2 years. It's not going to happen in 5, but it will happen as quick as we can.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Madam Chair?
Mr. Holland.
With that note, I still feel like there might be some conversations needed to have between staff and the applicant about the dates and what would make staff feel more comfortable before I'd feel comfortable moving this forward. Because we can make a recommendation and say 3 years, but I'd still rather have staff feel more comfortable with that. And maybe if they were to work out some sort of formal agreement before it comes back to us again, that could be something that helps mitigate that. That was why I brought up that suggestion, but again, that leaves the city in charge of managing something that they don't want to manage, but anyway, just a thought. I'd love to hear my other commissioners' thoughts on some of the other conditions too that we had requested of us.
Madam Chair, members of the commission, I know you're in the middle of deliberations, but I think I just want to clarify for the record what our intentions are for the landscape business. So, as you know, staff recommended denial of the annexation. In our presentation to you, it wasn't for you. It's not that we're not willing to work with the applicant. The intent is that if the commission wants to recommend that use continue to city council, then we ask that you continue the project out so that we can bring back some DA provisions that you feel comfortable with. I think that's the intent, not staff. It's not staff working with the applicant to be comfortable with the business. It's what you feel comfortable with as you make a recommendation to city council and ultimately becomes a city council decision. But if that's the direction you want us to go, we need the time to come up with the DA provisions to support the annexation request. That's really the intent for the continuance.
Makes sense.
Madam Chair?
Commissioner McCarville.
I do agree that I'm with Commissioner Holland as far as the sidewalk. I would be comfortable with that in phase 2. It doesn't make any sense to dig it all up and be doing stuff when it's not ready, especially when the sidewalk doesn't lead to anywhere yet. But I do think the sidewalk needs to be there. But I would be comfortable with it in the phase that part of the property is being done. And with the cul-de-sac and that driveway, I think that was city council's purview, I believe. It doesn't seem too excessive, but I think that was.
Madam Chair, excuse me, if I may, there is no condition of approval for the sidewalk to be constructed in phase 1. That was in the previous staff report.
Okay.
So please make sure you're referencing the current staff report and any changes you might make to the staff report. With the removal of the development agreement provisions, there's just the preliminary plat conditions now.
Okay, so those other,
Non-issue on that one.
those items that were listed on the summary page of the applicant's presentation, we don't need to address.
They were in reference to the previous version of the staff report.
Okay,
The timing, if, like Bill referenced, if the commission is leaning towards recommendation of the annexation, it's really the commission's purview on the timing for that to remain in effect. So if you guys would make a decision on that, then recommend continuance so that staff can come up with recommended development agreement provisions.
okay, so then you want to address all those other items in the continued version, and we don't need to address those in a motion tonight. We just need to continue the whole thing.
I'm not sure what other ones you're referencing.
On the applicants, can you go back to the applicant's presentation? And that summary page there, they were wanting a couple of items deleted.
A1B, A1E, A1.
I believe those, Dave, did those reference the previous version of the staff report?
Madam Chair, if you like, I could just help here for a minute. The conditions referenced are primarily, first of all, the pathway that goes to the eastern side. That's what those two conditions are, Sonia. A1E and A2E. A1B, now I'm going from memory, but these are all the new staff report, the new revised final staff report we're referencing here. If you go back up, I'll find it real fast.
So the requirement for the common lot with the pathway to the north to McMillan would be something that you need to make a recommendation on if you wish to vary from the staff report. So, Dave did include all the
Okay.
current conditions.
So if we want the pathway to stay, that's the way it's written in the newest version, and so we don't have to mention it at all.
Right, thank you.
Perfect. Okay.
Madam Chair, the other one was the western cul-de-sac, that A1B, that was the western cul-de-sac.
And Madam Chair, there is no provision in the UDC to vary from that maximum length of 450 feet.
Okay.
There is, a variance doesn't apply, and neither does alternative compliance.
Okay.
In other words, that can't be waived.
Unless city attorney has any recommendation on that.
Nope. Do not.
Thank you. Is that clear to all the commissioners?
Okay.
Madam Chair, just to summarize what we just talked about, so if we make a motion to continue this tonight, we still need to address what items we want them to talk about and adjust in the staff report, and then when it comes back to us, we would make a motion to city council if those things still hadn't been changed, if we wanted them changed in the next one.
Right.
So in my summary of what we've talked about so far, and I'd love to get your other thoughts, but we would want to continue it to let staff work on a new staff report and a development agreement application for that landscaping business if we decided we wanted that 5 acres annexed as part of this application. That the installing the sidewalk in front of 1157 East McMillan, we could make a recommendation that they remove the phasing requirement. And the western cul-de-sac, we can't change anything about, so we would just ignore that. And then granting the waiver for the existing resident for the transportation access probably isn't relevant at this point because, again, we're not moving it forward to council if we make a recommendation for continuation. And then there's the common lot pathway that we still need to address. It looks like staff has requested in condition A1F that they submit a revised qualified open space exhibit because they need to do some changes, modifications. So I would say leave that in there.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Sonia, I'm sorry, I'm a little unclear on where that proposed pathway would go. Very east boundary? Okay.
Now I'm trying to remember if it was up from here or up from here. Just one second here. It was in the second phase in the brown area, this general location.
In between the lots 12
Yes,
and,
yeah, anywhere here would be fine.
okay. And it was my understanding from reading the application that that landowner is not in favor of having a pedestrian pathway next to his property, just. Any other questions for staff or for the applicant? So I think that with a motion, we need to be clear whether we're intending on recommending approval of the annexation or agreeing with the staff in denial of the annexation, and then all of the items that we would request the applicant to work on in our comments to state each section of the staff report clearly.
Madam Chair,
Commissioner McCarville.
I would support, I think it is in the best interest to annex the property at this time to allow this development to move forward in a reasonable manner. So I would be in favor of continuing it to allow the staff to put the verbiage in that it needs to have.
Madam Chair,
Commissioner Olson.
I agree with that idea of continuing to give them time to work through this.
Okay. Commissioner Holland.
Madam Chair, I'd be happy to make the motion if everybody's ready for me to, or if anyone else would like to, they're more than welcome. All right. I move to continue file number H-2019-0058 to the hearing date of, I'm going to pause for a second and look at staff for direction on when they'd like to move that to.
25th.
Do we need to close the public hearing, by the way, before we do this?
No, it is.
Okay. Oh, that's right. No, we don't.
Does that give you enough time to work on development agreement?
Yes.
Okay, July 18th. So I move,
Second.
I haven't made the whole motion yet, sorry.
I know.
All right, I move to continue file number H-2019-0058 to the hearing date of July 18th for the following reasons. That staff would work on a development agreement for this application related to the landscape business operations and how those 5 acres would be transitioned in at the 1157 East McMillan, and when they would be able to phase out of operation. That the applicant would work on a new revised qualified open space exhibit and landscaping plan that complies with the minimum open space requirements, but before that comes back to us. And I think that's all I need to include right now.
I second.
It has been moved and seconded to continue file number H20190058 to the date of July 18th, 2019. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
None opposed. Motion carries. So we need to go ahead and make a motion to close that hearing then, correct? Before we open the next one, or are we?
No, we're fine.
This is a little out of order from what we usually do.
you're
All
fine.
right, good. Okay.
You're good.
All right, so now we will open the public hearing for Caldera Canyon H20190062. Begin with the staff report.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the commission. The last project before you this evening is for preliminary plat and development agreement modification. The subject site is 2.83 acres of land. It's currently zoned R8 and is located at 1294 East Layfield Drive.
To the north is single-family residential. It's zoned RUT in the county. To the south is East Leafield Drive, which is a collector and a single-family residential subdivision, Quinzer Commons, which is zoned R8. To the east is single-family residential, zoned RUT in the county. And to the west is a single-family residential subdivision, Quinzer Commons, which is also zoned R8. This property was annexed and entered into a development agreement with the Quinzer North subdivision in 2005. It was final platted as Lot 7, Block 31, as within Quinzer Commons, number 10, in 2006. The comprehensive plan feature land use map designation is mixed-use community with the neighborhood center overlay at the top. You'll see that in the center map here. Tonight, the applicant's requesting a preliminary plat consisting of 16 building lots and 3 common lots on 2.83 acres of land, and a request to modify the existing development agreement to remove the subject property and to enter into a new development agreement. The applicant proposes to construct 15 single-family residential detached dwellings with 1 existing home to remain at the southeast portion of the site here, Lot 12, Block 2. The proposed gross density is 5.65 dwelling units per acre, while the net density is 6.91 dwelling units per acre, which falls slightly below the mixed-use neighborhood with the neighborhood center overlay target density of 8+ dwelling units per acre. Given the infill nature of the 2.83 acre site, staff feels that the proposed development is generally consistent with the flume designation and is supportive of the density. Lot sizes are consistent with the R8 zoning district. 1 public street access is proposed from East Leafield Drive here. It's stubbed to the north for future redevelopment of this larger RUT zoned parcel here. The existing home is proposing to maintain its current access to East Leafield Drive. The driveway is right about here. East Leafield is a collector road. The existing home is proposing to maintain its current access there via the existing driveway. The UDC requires that all subdivisions provide local street access to any use that currently takes access from a collector road. In accord with UDC standards, staff is recommending that the applicant extend a local street stub to the east, somewhere over here, to this RUT zoned parcel, and also extend a driveway to the west to provide access to the existing home in lieu of the existing driveway. Council approval of a waiver to UDC 113A3 is requested for the current driveway access to remain and to refrain from extending a local street to the east. If council does not grant both access waiver requests, the applicant will need to redesign their plat to provide local street access to Lot 12, Block 2, into the parcel to the east. Let's see, there was a redevelopment plan or redevelopment exhibit that was submitted with the application showing how this parcel would generally redevelop if the current land or current property owner were to move. Generally, they're proposing 1 extra lot if that were to happen with a hammerhead driveway. And also a common driveway exhibit was submitted showing 4 homes that will be taking access from the common lot. These 2 will be taking access from Heritage View Avenue, which is the public street that's being proposed. Conceptual building elevations were submitted. Generally looking like this, it'll be pretty consistent with other homes that are in the area, all single level. And with that, I guess written testimony was received from the applicant's representative, Penelope Konstantakis. Staff is recommending approval with the conditions in the staff report, and we'll stand for any questions. Thank you.
Do the commissioners have any questions for staff? No? The applicant, please come forward.
Madam Chairman, Commissioners, Penelope Konstantakis, Post Office Box 405, Boise, Idaho 83701. As staff has indicated, the applications before you this evening are for subdivision and for a development agreement modification to remove the subject site from the Quinzer Commons number 10 development agreement and implement a new development agreement. As you know, Caldera Canyon is an infill subdivision west of Locust Grove between Ustick and Middleton, and it's your evening to deal with this general square mile of property that's almost fully developed. At least 90% of this square mile is fully developed. There's only about 6 parcels remaining that are large enough for more than one lot or up to a few lots, with the largest parcel being north of the subject site. You just saw 4 of those parcels with the Silver Springs subdivision application. The lot sizes that are proposed will be comparable with the variety of lot sizes in the vicinity, and the architecture will complement the homes in the vicinity of the site. This subdivision does benefit from the existing road network and proximity to schools, public parks, and commercial services. Other than the street being constructed with the subdivision, no other road improvements will be required. Another benefit of this subdivision is that it will position the parcel to the north with connectivity and services when development occurs on that parcel. So I'd like to just go directly to my comments regarding the staff's conditions of approval, if that's okay. So the first item is the shared driveway near the north boundary of the site that's going to serve the current 4 proposed lots. We provided some illustrations demonstrating that there can either be one more lot or internal access for the existing residents. And if you could put up the one with the blue house that shows, or the blue, that's the second one, this one here, that's correct. So there's really only 2 options. We can add an additional lot in the future, or we can put in an internal driveway, which is the next one with the pink there. So if we were to an internal access point for the existing home, there won't be any landscape buffer along Layfield because we'll have to get into it in order to provide enough radius for people to get turned around and into the garage. So, but with the ability now for this home to be sold as a horse property, I don't anticipate that the additional lot is going to show up at the end of that shared driveway for some time to come. So, and as I've discussed, the ability to add an internal driveway to the property without deleting a lot to the east of the site of the existing home is just virtually impossible. Based on the most recent revisions to the ACHD policy for average trips on local streets, the threshold is 2,000 vehicle trips per day. With Layfield classified as a collector, that ADT threshold is even higher. Based on these most current counts, there are 1,499 vehicle trips in a 24-hour period on Layfield, and that includes the trips that are generated by the existing residents. We are requesting a waiver from City Council to allow the existing residents to retain its access to Layfield. It won't generate any kind of an additional transportation burden because those trips are already included in the existing trip counts. Since it would be very difficult, if not impossible, to provide internal access, and Layfield is not operating at even a local street threshold, we believe our request to retain that existing driveway is a reasonable one. The memorandum that I provided to staff, and late, thank you for accommodating me, Stephanie, discusses the shared driveway comments. The paved area meets the fire department standard for length, and that's 150 feet. The remaining portion of that common lot will be used as a stormwater detention location. In the event there's a local or an additional lot added in the future, a full hammerhead would have to be constructed, and you've already seen that illustration. Access for lots 7 and 11 can be accommodated without extending the pavement distance, as shown on that shared driveway illustration that we submitted with our application. Another option, if it's needed, would be for lots 10 and 11 and lots 6 and 7 to have a short common driveway before they're separated to feed to the garages of those 2 lots. So with a landscape buffer required between the driveways, we may need a waiver for that, or submit an alternative compliance application, which is we'd be happy to do. We'd be happy to entertain other options if someone can think of something. In any event, we'd be happy to work with the fire department to try and resolve this somewhat minor question. The possibility of a stub street to the east was proposed by staff. The project team feels that this would create an unfair burden on the subject site because at least one, if not two lots, would be lost. In addition, since the city has designated the area surrounding the intersection of Locust Grove and Layfield as a location for neighborhood commercial, we believe that cross-connectivity between the subject site and the parcel to the east would be less than ideal and would compromise the residential character of the subject development, given that commercial development is likely to occur on the parcel to the east. Additionally, another stub street would reduce density to an even more undesirable level. And finally, a stub street to the east would be blocked on the eastern parcel because there are 3 existing structures. The greatest distance from the property line is 118 feet, and I don't know that a stub street could be put in to the east property and not wipe out at least one of those structures. So we would really prefer to not have a stub street. I think it's combining residential traffic and commercial traffic is good to be avoided if at all possible. I also provided an illustration of the immediate vicinity of the site and anticipated traffic movement, which there it is. Okay, so what I did was I just put arrows to locate where, along with our stub street, where all the access points would be. So we've got a stub street in Quinzer. The northern parcel already has access for at least 2, if not 3, to Glen Haven, and then the 4th would be our parcel. The eastern parcel, the parcel that's east of us, has got about 492 feet of frontage on Layfield. So I think that there's enough room there for the eastern parcel to provide access with another connection to Layfield and not violate the ACHD's policy for offset between arterial, and that's a minor arterial roadway, and another street access off of a collector. So we'd like to, another connection on the eastern parcel would be reasonable, maybe in line with the street that is across from the eastern parcel on Layfield. Mr. Graham, who spoke to you about the previous application, he spoke to you about irrigation water, and he is adjacent to us. He's the northern parcel. So our project engineer has a very preliminary irrigation system design in mind. He's aware of the fact that we have some irrigation water delivery constraints that we need to deal with, and I would suggest that Mr. Graham, Derek Kerner, who's the project engineer, and Dan Young, who is the owner of the eastern parcel, get together between now and our city council hearing and come to a consensus on irrigation water and the delivery system. In addition, the existing home has a well, so we have a secondary source of water should we need it, along with domestic water. So I think it's going to take Derek working with Mr. Graham and Mr. Young, which he's happy to do on solving any irrigation constraints that we may have. The landscape buffer is shown in a common lot or common lots on the plat, and currently the frontage is planted with mature arborvitae. They're big and beautiful. And it creates a solid visual buffer right now. Rather than removing some of the healthy plants that are there, as suggested in condition 3A, we would propose that these plants, as these plants reach their end of life cycle, that they be replaced with trees, and we could certainly add that to the development agreement. It just seems a shame to take out healthy plants for trees when we can make accommodation for future planting of trees when these arborvitae start to die out. In conclusion, we do request that the project be approved as proposed with the following changes to the site-specific conditions of approval. And I brought an extra copy with me for you all so that you could have it to work off of. All right, so item 2B, and that is, we request the Planning and Zoning Commission recommend to the City Council that the existing access for 1294 East Layfield be retained. Under item 2C, which requires a stub street to the east, we ask that that condition be removed. Item 2F, the applicant will work with the fire department with regard to our shared driveway. In the event that it is needed, the applicant would like the option to provide shared access point off of the shared driveway for lots 10 and 11 and lots 6 and 7. Under item 3A, rather than removing the existing plants to add trees, we would request that this be changed so that when the plants reach their end of life cycle, they can be replaced with trees at that point in time, and that can certainly be added to the new development agreement. And then under item 7, the shared driveway is exactly 150 feet deep, which is the limit of the fire department for the distance without having to have a hammerhead. So in the event the fire department is not comfortable with the driveways as shown on the shared driveway illustration, which I have not put in front of Joe, but I will. The applicant requests a waiver to allow a short shared access point for lots 10 and 11 and 6 and 7, unless there is another alternative that I'm not aware of, and we would be happy to entertain that. And the north neighbor, Mr. Graham, is in attendance this evening, and there is a item with regard to fencing along that north boundary line that we will sort out with Mr. Graham before we get to City Council. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Any questions for the applicant?
Madam Chair,
Commissioner Holland?
one question is if this area is designed to be created at some point as neighborhood commercial, and there might be commercial uses on the east side.
Yes.
You talked a little bit about some of the arborvitaes that are there, but what kind of buffering is there going to be between those homes being constructed on the east boundary of the property line to transition into the commercial? Is there going to be additional?
There'll be a fence. There'll be a fence, yes.
Stephanie, can you bring up the shared drive exhibit, please?
Madam Chair, yes, just a second, sorry.
So lots 6 and 7, is it not possible to flip those so that the front is facing to the east and then put a common drive in between lots 6, 5, and 4 to access the property to the south? Is there not enough width on that eastern boundary of the southern lot, lot 12, to pull a driveway around on the east side? Does that make sense?
We'd lose a lot that way.
Okay.
Madam Chairman, I'm
sure
sorry.
You've tried everything, but you asked for suggestions. Okay, yeah, there's not enough. Yeah, I can see that. Okay, if there's no more questions for the applicant, is there anyone signed up to testify?
There is not anybody signed up to
Please
testify.
give it to the clerk. There's no one signed up to testify? Okay, is there anyone in the audience that would like to come forward and speak? Okay. There's no more questions for the applicant? Can I get a motion to close the public hearing? It has been moved and seconded to close the public hearing for Caldera Canyon, H20190062. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Unopposed, motion carries.
Madam Chair, one more question for staff. Could you pull open the future use map again for this site, just so we can kind of look at how those parcels sit around it?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Holland, this is the future land use map here. So it shows mixed-use neighborhood on this parcel, and then the neighborhood center overlay is actually across all these, it's that half circle here.
So I know you may not have another application in right now for any of the neighboring parcels, but Could you give any direction to what you would advise future applicants to try and consider in some of those neighboring parcels around this?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Holland, I think if future applicants were to come in specifically to the north or to the east, we would try to encourage them to have maybe more of a mix of uses, something that would be more of neighborhood serving. So commercial would be good, or a mix of housing and commercial. If when they came in, they'd have to annex and zone appropriately. So there are a mix of zoning designations that kind of correlate with those use map designations, but depending on the project, obviously, too. So.
And one more question on that. Are any of, this specific property is already zoned R8. They're just going for their preliminary plat tonight. Are any of those other parcels nearby it, are those both zoned agriculture right now, or are they zoned?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Holland, they're both zoned RUT.
Okay. Thank you. That's helpful. Madam Chair,
Commissioner Holland?
since everybody else is jumping up and down to speak. My only concern looking at this is overall looking at the future use map and having that be neighborhood commercial, as it were, it's kind of a funky parcel for future commercial with the L shape that would be left around it. Obviously, this piece is already zoned R8, so we can't really change that in this conversation, but that was just one of my observations. So they asked us to consider several things. Overall, I don't have a ton of concerns except for how it transitions to some of that neighboring commercial, and that's why I was asking about landscaping too. I worry that a fence may not be much of a buffer if you have a neighboring commercial use come in there, so I don't know if there's anything we want to talk about as far as if there's any buffering that we need to have them do, but.
I would assume that the applicant of that commercial project would be required to do the buffering, so.
Madam Chair,
Probably true.
that's how I'm remembering it as well, is it's that commercial development that would have the responsibility to put in probably about a 25 foot.
Depending on
Yeah.
what the application shows, yeah. Usually I try to make my comments last, but I'll go ahead and, the Stubb Street to the east, I initially had some concern about, but now knowing it's a possibility that that would not develop into residential, I'm not as concerned. And if they're able to take access off of Lee Field, potentially across from the street that's on the south side to the south of the eastern property, then that might line up well for access from there for the future. And then as far as the shared drive, I'm not sure that that is something that's in our purview. Isn't that really for council to decide? Do we need to make a recommendation on that?
Madam Chair, members of the commission, it's actually something that they'd need to coordinate with the fire department. They're the ones that can kind of determine if that can be lengthened or what kind of measures they'd need to use to do something different. The main comment that I made in the staff report was that it's just a little bit odd of a configuration to have the driveways curving like that. So I was basically just mentioning that I want them to coordinate with the fire department to figure out if they can lengthen it a little bit, and if that would be okay without having to do a hammerhead or some other mechanism to make it turnaroundable.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So really, we don't need to take into consideration the redevelopment exhibit or those other options, because that's just something they'll work out with the fire department.
Madam Chair, yes, those were mainly just so you could picture what might happen in the future if it is to redevelop. As Penelope was saying, I don't foresee it probably redeveloping. If it's larger acre lots are in demand, so I can see most people might want to keep it that way, but it's just intended to be kind of a visual aid if that does happen.
Okay. Thank you.
Madam Chair,
Commissioner Holland?
if we were to modify those conditions on 7 and 2F that relate to the shared driveway and what the fire department requires, I think I would just make that a condition that they work with the fire department on items 2F and 7 before city council to meet whatever fire department's going to require of them. And that would leave that open to the fire department and the applicant to work on. Madam Chair, while I was still talking, I guess I'll go through the other ones they have. I don't see a concern with removing 3A where, rather than move the plant, or modifying 3A to say, rather than move the plants, replace them at the end of their life cycle. I know that gets to a little bit tricky too of how do you enforce that, and when do you define when the end of a life cycle is of a plant, but if you can preserve vegetation, I don't see a concern with that one. And then I agree with your comments about the existing access off of Layfield and keeping that. And the same comments about, I agree with you on your comments to the east. I don't see it necessary if there's going to be commercial that develops on the east side of the property. You have another substreet there.
I mean, we don't know that for sure, but it's just, there's 6 lots there. If that section was longer, if there were more lots, then I would be more inclined to recommend that stay. Is that something that we can, Stephanie, is that something that we can actually, is that a code provision that can be waived, the stub street to the east? Or that we can
Madam
recommend
Chair,
that?
both of those conditions, 2C and 2B, they're to be waived by City Council, so,
Okay.
but your recommendation would be helpful to them too in their deliberation, so you want to include that.
Thank you.
Madam Chair,
Commissioner McCarville?
Stephanie, do we have any pictures of what that arborvitae line looks like?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Carville, yes, I will pull that up. Hold on.
I guess my thoughts here, once those go, they go quickly, and are we maybe looking at, should we go ahead and keep the, all along there?
Madam Chair, Commissioner McCarville, one of the options too, rather than including it in the DA, would be to have the applicant seek alternative compliance with as an administrative approval as well. So that's another option for the arborvitaes.
Stephanie, if they do that, then when these trees come to the end of their life, there's no longer a requirement to have anything there? If they've received alternative compliance, would those not have to be replaced?
Madam Chair, if they agreed to landscape it the way that it's approved with an alternative compliance, it would have to be maintained that way. So if something were to die, it would need to be replaced.
Okay.
For a landscape
Because of
plan
the
that was
DA
approved.
agreement?
Well, it would be
or-
because of an alternative compliance with like a landscape plan for the plat.
Okay, okay.
Madam Chair, I would
Commissioner McCarville?
be in support of basically all that's been discussed so far here. In a very orderly manner as suggested by Commissioner Holland. Thank you for keeping the notes.
Commissioner Holland is a master at these motions.
Happy to let someone else make this one, though.
Commissioner Olson, do you have anything to add?
No, I don't. I'm there. Sorry.
Madam Chair,
Commissioner Holland?
item 2B in the staff report reads, Lot 12, Block 2 shall take access from North Heritage View Avenue in accord with UDC unless waived by City Council. So I just want to make sure if we include the change there, they want the existing access to be retained. That's what she had mentioned when she came up.
Correct. So they're requesting a waiver for that requirement for local access from City Council.
Yeah.
Yeah, Madam Chair,
Commissioner McCarville?
for the record, for City Council, I think I'm supportive of that access remaining there. I don't think it's a overly busy road, and that drive could probably stay there.
I agree.
Do we want me to try and make a motion, or does anyone else have anything?
Yes, please do.
else?
I'm
No,
just
pausing,
reviewing
okay.
the staff report to make sure I
That's what I
have,
was trying to do too.
give us a second to review the staff report and make sure we have addressed everything with the right
Them all.
numbers and letters. So 2F, I don't think we've specifically discussed that. Applicant shall clarify the alignment of the driveways to Lot 7 and 11, Block 2 with a common driveway, and if applicable, shall coordinate with the fire department. So we want to leave that in the staff report as is. At least that's my recommendation.
I would agree. Madam Chair, my comment was that the applicant would work with the fire department on items 2F and item 7 on meeting whatever the fire department needed for requirements. But to leave those in the staff report.
Okay, so we just won't change anything on those. Right?
Yeah. All right, Madam Chair.
Commissioner Holland, go for it.
After considering all staff, applicant, and public testimony, I move to recommend approval to City Council file number H-2019-0062 as presented in the staff report for the hearing date of June 20th, 2019, with the following modifications. On 2B, that the existing access be retained. On 2C, that we strike the requirement or recommend that council.
Sorry, let me interrupt you really quickly. I don't think that we're, I think instead of stating that we want a modification made on 2B, we should just say that we're recommending that council waive the requirement. Because if we're not technically trying to modify the staff report, I don't think. So, that makes sense. I know
Yep.
that's a word in technicality, but, sorry.
Nope, I'm with you. Okay, I'm going to restart. I'll just start over with the, I move to recommend approval to City Council that we would be in support of council waiving the requirement and allowing the existing access to be retained with item 2B in the staff report. Looking at 2C, that council would consider allowing the applicant to not be required to have the east substreet. That the applicant would work with the fire department to meet their requirements for items 2F and 7. And on 3A, that rather than remove the plants and plant new ones, that the applicant would either seek alternative compliance with staff or that they, council would allow them to replace those plants at the end of their life cycle as requested.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded to recommend approval to City Council for application number H20190062. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And opposed? Motion carries. Okay.
Madam Chair, before we conclude this evening, I did just want to let you know that Stephanie has accepted a position at the City of Boise, so she'll be with the city. This is probably her last time that she'll be presenting to you
Sorry to hear that.
as part of our team, but I wanted to let you know that we wish her the best, and she's done an excellent job for us. And I'm very
Thank
proud
you all.
of
It's
her
been a
for all the
pleasure.
job that she's
Thank
done.
you.
So just
We were just getting you trained.
I know, we were just getting used to my voice on the microphone and everything, and now I'm leaving. I'm sorry.
You'll be missed. Congratulations.
With you.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Madam
Motion?
Chair,
Commissioner McCardle.
I move we adjourn.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to close the hearing for June 20th, 2019. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
None opposed, motion carries.